With the WSL season just a week away now, we're today going to look at the bottom half of the table, look at some of the sides that could push up towards the top half and some that could be dragged towards the bottom of the table. Harry, I think that battle for that one relegation spot, or avoiding that one relegation spot, is going to be so fierce this season, especially with how much investment we're seeing from London City Lionesses.
Yeah, 100%. I think it will be a concern for the majority of the teams in the league, right from 5th, 6th downwards, because not only, as you say, have we seen London City come up and put so much investment in, which would theoretically mean that one side is going to have to go down in place of them, but also how close that mid-table fight was last season. There's a very good chance that this season could be decided by a couple of points. We could see a couple of points separate 12th and 6th, 7th. So I think there'll be a lot of concern in that mid-pack that they could get dragged into a place they don't want to be. We've always said that it's likely we're going to see someone big have to play in that playoff match for to try and stay in the top flight. But I think overall it's going to be a tight midfield battle. So if I was a fan or an owner of one of those teams, I would be worried, and I'd make sure that I get this summer right, because it will be close and there will be very fine margins between who goes down and who finishes in a decent position come the end of this season.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to look at 4 teams. We've always made a commitment on this channel to try and cover every WSL club before and after a season. We're doing it in a slightly different format this year, as you may have noticed if you've followed the channel for a long time. But we're going to look through 4 teams today. And we're going to start with Brighton then, Harry. Brighton, the big overachievers at the start of last season. They came out, played attractive football. There was a lot of good feeling about Vidicic, about the side. But we really saw them tail off towards the end of the campaign. Is that something that you think should concern Brighton fans? Is that something to be worried about? Or do you think that they will bounce back in a sort of renewed style this season?
I think it's a bit of both, and it is a bit of an unknown. Yes, definitely. I would much rather, for Brighton, I think they'd rather be in a position where they, like we have seen with other sides in the league, that came into form towards the end of the season and look to come over across this summer and then start this season with a bang. But yeah, Brighton, they really didn't end last season very well. They looked all over the place at times, and they looked like a really poor team in certain matches in 2025. But that doesn't mean that we should forget what they did do in the first half of the season, because they could just as easily come into this 25-26 campaign and start off exactly how they did at the start of last season. So it goes both ways. I think, yes, it would be concerning that they did end last season poorly and that playing at a high standard wasn't maintained for throughout the 24-25 season. But they could easily come in and start playing really well once again. So it is a bit of a weird one, but it's the kind of form towards the end of the season where you need a good summer to get on top of it. You need to settle down and work out what you're going to do. And if Vidicic has found a way to solve their problems, then happy days, they could be in a really good position. But yeah, it's very important now that with if we get closer to the season, they make sure any kind of form or thoughts from last season have been washed away, and they're fully focused on hitting a good run of form into the start of this campaign.
Yeah, I think it's testament to how well they started the season that they finished 5th despite winning just 3 of their last 14 matches. Like that's it. Yeah. It's an insanely bad end to the season considering how high up the table they finished. But it was such a strong start. And let's look at what's happened this summer then. So Brighton have lost quite a few key defenders. And obviously quite a key forward in Nikita Paris as well. So a lot of change there. But could that also be spun as a positive? Let's take a look at some of the players in question. Let's start with Nikita Paris departing then. I mean, you've got to feel that's a huge blow to Brighton, given how important she was for them scoring goals in crucial moments.
Absolutely. Paris was crucial to Brighton's season, and if you take her goals away, then suddenly they'd have been in a very, very difficult spot. Now, obviously, they would have had someone else playing up front, and they may have still scored, but Nikita Paris is exactly what Brighton needed, someone who was going to work hard up there and put the effort in, would be brilliant in the press, but also a deadly finisher. That's what I think Nikita Paris has with that experience, and it's why she can still maintain a very high level in the WSL, is that clinicality. The amount of times we saw Paris last season score from a bit of a nothing chance, or she's so deadly in that penalty area. But if you give her something to work with, she will take that and somehow find the back of the net. And that's what Paris did so well for Brighton. And I'm sure that's what she'll do well for London City Lionesses. But that is a big blow, because it is very difficult to replace a player like Paris because of her all-round quality. She's not a striker I look at and I go, she's brilliant at this, but she's got a few weaknesses. She is just all-round across the board, just good at everything, brilliant in the air, great with the ball at her feet. So it is a big miss, and with the volume of goals she scored last season, Brighton need to find a way to replace that and replicate that, because if you don't score goals, you don't win games in football, and to lose your main striker who scored a lot of goals for you last season could be a big blow if Brighton aren't careful about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they have done adequately to replace. So let's talk about Michelle Aguiman. I think with Aguiman, what you've got is someone who will massively fulfill what Vidicic wants from a forward when they are attacking. My question around Michelle Aguiman comes with her defensive work. I just don't think we've seen enough evidence yet of her being strong out of possession. I don't think we've seen her pressing to be at the standard which Vidicic would require. I don't think that we've seen that tracking back occasionally. But what we will see is Brighton be able to play that ball forwards, Aguiman be able to hold it up, bring others into the game and launch fast breaks, because not only is she quite a physical player, but she's also quite a quick player as well. So being able to launch a ball into her playing an up, back and through type pass where she'll play it back to a player that goes over the top and then Aguiman turns and runs in behind, that sort of situation could be incredibly dangerous. So I think she's going to give them a huge amount of transitional threat. And I think, again, that out of possession side of a game will develop throughout this season, you'd expect, but that could see some short-term issues for Brighton. A huge part of pressing structures relies on every player being synchronised in a structure. And if you've got a player who isn't perhaps inept at that role, you've got a slight issue there to start the campaign with. But I think overall it shouldn't have a too drastic impact. I think she'll be able to replace the output from Nikita Paris. And let's talk the back line then, because they've brought in 3 new starting centre-halves potentially. They've obviously lost a lot of experience though, but it feels overall like a net positive.
Yeah, I think so. As you say, I mean, they lost defenders across the board. They've lost 5 or 6, which is, to be honest, that's very Brighton to lose 4 or 5 of starting players. But I think that, as you say, it's not a necessarily bad thing. Brighton's biggest problem last season was that defensively, on the ball, they were not good enough to do what Vidicic wanted to do. That's what caught them out. It was the main reason they conceded goals, that Vidicic would try and play football with defenders that weren't good enough on the ball, then end up losing it in their own penalty area, and I think that, and obviously then concede, and it'd be a massive shame. And the amount of errors leading to goal last season from Brighton's backline was incredible. It was crazy, especially for a side that finished 5th in the league. I've never seen that amount of errors for a side that managed to finish in the top half. So it was kind of impressive, the fact that Brighton did remain in the top 6. But yeah, I think that it is always risky, making pretty much, I think it's fair to say, pretty much wholesale changes to your backline because of the amount of players they've lost and brought in. But when your backline struggled as much as Brighton's did last season, and you've replaced them with players who are much better on the ball and much more suited to what Vidicic wants to do, I agree. I think it makes the most sense. And having centre halves who are better on the ball mixed with having Aguiman as an outlet, it should shore Brighton up massively defensively, because not only will they lose the ball less in their own penalty area, but if they are under pressure, they can go long to Aguiman and just get themselves, relieve the pressure on themselves a bit. Yeah. So yeah, they've got a lot of options now, but overall I think that changes in the backline were needed, and I think they've done well to go out and just be ruthless and say to the defenders they had at the time that they weren't good enough, and go out and replace them with better ball players.
Yeah, and let's take a look then at those changes on the squad screen. So as we can see, I've lined Brighton up in the 3-4-3 they used a lot last season. Now, there are some slight questions whether they may change this shape, because they've got a few players now who could play attacking midfield, so we could see something more like a 4-2-3-1, especially considering they don't really have a natural left wing back. I mean, Ola Slagas is capable of playing both sides, but she's not naturally a left wing back, so they haven't really replaced Poppy Pattinson in that regard. But at the back 3 then, they've got a few options this season. They've still got experienced options like Jocelyn Karabali, they've still got Caitlin Hayes, who played a lot for them last season, but in terms of the new signings, I think what they've done is brought in players, as you say, who are very comfortable in possession, and that will benefit them greatly. But there is very little WSL experience here. The only player who's ever played in the WSL before is Melis Mpome, and she got, I think, 200 minutes at Chelsea last season. Possibly not even that. And then you've got Minami, who hasn't got experience much at the top level, but is a very capable centre-half, especially in possession, and Venegas, who was playing in the Liga F last season. So 3 players who we've seen are very good on the ball. Venegas, more of a traditional centre-half than the other 2. I think more of a physical presence in the middle of the back line. So I think if they are playing a back 3, they'll put Mpome on the right-hand side. He'll be more comfortable on her favoured right-hand side. Venegas through the middle is going to be much more physical, and then Minami on this left-hand side. Obviously, Brighton's build-up is going to be really interesting this season. One of the things they tried to do last year, if I try and demonstrate it here, is that they would pull one centre-back wide into a full-back position. They would then have their two centre-halves splitting the goalkeeper, so you can play out either side, and then obviously the right-back would drop in. So I use Aoi in this example, and that creates that back four. Now, they could use this to great effect and use someone in this left wing back position who actually then pushes up when they've got the ball. And so they could use someone like a Camacho or maybe even a Simmons in that sort of position. So they've got options in that regard. But I think it is somewhat strange that they haven't replaced their starting left back. I mean, Poppy Pattinson was so key for what they wanted to do last season and how they progressed the ball. That just doesn't really make much sense to me. So unless I think Vidicic must have some sort of genius idea, or he's just very comfortable playing honest lagers there. But I would be very surprised if they were looking at this squad going into the season in the way that I've laid it out and going, yeah, we don't need a left wing back. They must be putting someone like a Camacho, or I mean, I'm not too familiar with the profile of Masaka. Potentially, that could be an option as well. But they must have someone in the squad they view as being able to play that left wing back role very well, or someone that he thinks he can coach into that position, because I just don't see where they've got that. If they haven't got that, why they're not buying a left wing back. But overall, Brighton, I think, probably due a very positive season. So, moving on to Everton then. 8th place last season for the Toffees, but we saw this huge revival in the second half of the campaign. They were sat bottom of the league after just 10 game weeks, I believe it was. But then in the second half of the season, we saw them really ramp up the performance level. And I think going into this season, with the women's team now moving permanently into Goodison Park, with some really good transfer business, I feel there's a lot of excitement around this Everton team.
Yeah, definitely. It's like the opposite of what we just spoke out of Brighton. Everton started really poorly and they looked like they were in big trouble. Brian Sorensen was under pressure, and I think that people were starting to really worry about Everton potentially having a terrible, terrible season. But a brilliant win against Man City at home, a brilliant January transfer window, and they came into 2025 as probably, in terms of form, they're up there with Villa as best of the rest. They were absolutely superb, and after that transfer window, I thought they came in and looked really sharp. And to be honest, I think the performances were probably better than the results. They could have finished higher if they wanted to, but as you say, a massive sign for the club, both on and off the pitch, and hopefully we're going to see Goodison Park full of people backing Everton for what could be a really, really strong season. I think credit to Sorensen in the way they've turned things around and the way they've gone out in both the January window at the start of the year and this summer, because they've gone out and been brave, and they've said that they're coming in, they're spending money, and they want to compete. Even the deals they haven't managed to get over the line, they're still showing that they're trying to go for those kind of players and trying to compete and throw money out, and that's exactly what it needs. And I think that a big summer for Everton could roll into being a really good season, but overall it's a good manager and a good squad with a good window. For me, that is ticking all the boxes of being in for a really, really good season.
Yeah, I certainly think it helps to create a feel-good factor around the club. How much of an impact do you think moving to a permanent stadium with the history and the heritage of Goodison Park, how much impact do you think that could have on this team?
I think it will probably have a bigger impact than people expect. It is a massive thing to go from playing, the kind of stadiums that we see the women's side play at, which is only a couple thousand here and there, and that's only at the best grounds, to be put into a ground of the size of Goodison Park, and the audience there should be absolutely brilliant. If you've got that many people backing Everton to go well, I mean, I can't wait for the derbies this season. The derby is going to be another really, really good one, but I think that, it's going to have a massive impact. It could really transform their season, because it is a huge difference from playing in front of a couple thousand to 30, 40,000. That's a completely different metric, and hopefully we see it sold out as much as possible, because they've got some really big players, and hopefully they're going to shine on a very good stage and a much better pitch, much better facilities. It's only a big positive. It's a massive positive for Everton as a whole, but for the women's side especially, it's great to see them get Goodison Park as their own home. And if they make it a fortress, and their home, they can be so difficult to beat at home, exactly like the men's side were. Goodison Park could really become a fortress for Everton Women, and they could really, pull off some big results at home if they want to this season.
I think it's quite positive across the board in terms of it's going to, it should boost revenue for the women's side, because they'll make more in sales. They should be able to get more ticket sales, because it's very much in the heart of the community, rather than a lot of the women's grounds are like, in like the loosest definition of where that place is, like, you know, some corner somewhere that no one's heard of, and it's so difficult to get to it and stuff like that. But Goodison Park, right in the heart of the city. And obviously with the men's side tickets so difficult to get as well, I think people will want to go to Goodison Park, will want that nostalgia feeling, and will go and get behind the women's side. And I think if you're someone getting into women's football and you live in that area of England, and you're looking at, do I want to support Liverpool or Everton? I mean, obviously your parents are going to influence that, and where you're born, that could have a huge impact. But if you're choosing between the two as a young fan, and you see the Everton women's side playing at Goodison Park, that's got to be more interesting than Liverpool, who don't invest anything. They've just made £1.1 million on a transfer and not even spent it. So on the squad. So I think it's got to be this there's going to be this good feeling around Everton, I think, this season. And let's discuss what they've done in the market then, because it feels like it's been a very positive window for Everton. They've cut a lot of deadwood and they've brought in a lot of very decent players.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I think in terms of outgoings, they've done really well for me to get rid of players who probably weren't at the level, and you know, especially when you look at the sides who they're leaving to. You've got, you know, Lauren Thomas off to Sheffield United, Van Havemet has gone to Crystal Palace, Beatrice Sari's gone to Birmingham. You know, those players are leaving for the WSL too, and there's a reason for that. It's because they aren't at the level to play in the top flight anymore. But Everton have done really well to realise that before, you know, rather than playing them through, you know, when they're not up to standard anymore. They've been a bit cutthroat and they've said, you've served us well, but we need better players now. And I think that, you know, that's exactly what they needed to do. There have been a couple big losses in there. Obviously, Sarah Holmgard is the main one off to Real Madrid. But I think they've done really well across the board to replace what they've lost, basically just with better quality, similar profiles, but better quality. And it's been a really good window in terms of incomings, by finding that balance between experienced and youth, but also unknown players mixed with players who are well documented and brilliant. I think bringing Martina Fernandez in on a permanent is a brilliant piece of business. Maz Pacheco is a proven WSL player, and they've gone and picked out players from the likes of Heck and from the J League, and they've picked up these players who could come in and turn into really, you know, into stars. So I think it's been a really good window, a brilliant balanced window. They haven't just gone and, you know, spunked a load of cash up the wall and hoping that something's going to work. They've been really smart about their investments, and if some of these players come in and perform, and if these young talents come through and look really sharp, then they're going to be in for a brilliant season, because they've gone and signed some players that either are going to excel for them on the pitch massively, or and you know, become Everton heroes, or they're going to have a really good season and they're going to make loads of profit on them. So overall, a brilliant window that sets them up really nicely for this campaign.
And I actually think that the two, not new additions, but they'll feel like new additions, are the returning injuries of Ima Guevara and Aurora Gali.
Yeah.
Because they're two players who missed all of last season with injury, but should be back at some point in this campaign. So there's going to be a huge sort of influx of quality there, because they're two players who Everton sorely missed last season. And they did well to bring in loan players to try and plug those gaps. But ultimately, they never really filled the holes left by those very talented players. But now, if we take a look at this squad screen, Everton's squad is looking incredibly well balanced. So I'll put it in the 4-4-2 they used last season. I think we could see them change formation. I think given the number of midfield players, we could definitely see them play a bit more of a 4-3-3 and make use of someone like Hayley Ladd as the pivot player, and then like a Van Gaal and Gali pivot, or midfield two, something like this. That could definitely work. But I think that they've got a lot of options, Everton. I think that they will start the season using this 4-4-2. This Payne and Gargo front line was so devastating at times last season. But I think they could easily switch to something like a 4-3-3 and get Payne back on a favoured position out in the wide areas, either left or right. They've also brought in, obviously, Katie Robinson. I think that's a really nice loan move. I think that's a deal that suits all parties, really. With how Aston Villa are setting up in their 3-4-1-2, they don't really have any wingers. So for Katie Robinson, there wasn't a natural position. But at Everton, whatever formation they use this season, she's probably going to be this starting right winger. So I think she's going to get a lot of minutes. She's going to be a huge upgrade on Katja Snoyce. I don't think Snoyce is a bad player to have as a backup across the board, but I definitely think what let them down last season was trying to rely on Katja Snoyce to provide week in, week out. I don't think she can do it at this level anymore, but as someone who can come on and offer a bit of physicality in the last 10-15 minutes, I think that can definitely be a fine option. On the left-hand side, they've got really nice rotation now, because they've got the recovering Gabaro, but for competing for minutes is Vignola, who is a 20-year-old Spanish left winger who they've just brought in and looks really exciting. Plays on the left-hand side, can play a little bit more central as well, so that gives them another option in midfield, but tends to prefer playing out wide. And I think it will give really good competition to a player who's still coming back from injury. There's going to be a lot of minutes to go around there, and I think that's going to benefit both those players. Cabarro being able to come in a bit more gently, be eased into action, and Vignola being able to take advantage of that and perhaps get 25 minutes, 30 minutes here and there in order to ease Cabarro into action. Across the back line, lots of change, but quite positive. The fact they've ended up with 6 centre-backs is a little bit overcrowded. I feel, though, that they've got some really nice options. I really like their first 4 centre-backs. Ishikawa and Fernandez is how I think they'll line up. I think it could be Stenovic to start the season, but I think Ishikawa will be looking to be a starting centre-back throughout the season. I've also put Izzy Hobson in here. Now, obviously, Izzy Hobson's only 17, so there's every chance that she just plays more rotational minutes. But I think if she's not going to be involved with the first team this season, she would have got a loan move. So I think she'll have some involvement. I think she'll probably have more involvement than Weir and Finnegan, who I think are okay players, but are they starting or backup WSL quality? That's difficult to say. But I think they've got 4 centre-backs that I'm really happy with. I think 5 for across 2 centre-backs, you really want 5 to be comfortable with having enough options. 6 is a little bit too many, but it will probably be fine, because a lot of them could play right back as well. Hope probably the backup on the right back to Holmgard. Lovely left back rotation. And Mas Pacheco, proven WSL experience, lot of minutes, lot of quality. And I think she'll probably be back up to Kitagawa, who is a hugely experienced Japanese international, playing at BK Häcken for the last few years. She played in the Champions League. I mean, that's exactly what you want in a relatively young side like this Everton team, or at least a side that's got young players. To have someone like that, to have players who've been there and done it, that's exactly what you want. And to combine that with players like Hayley Ladd, who've been there and done it, this is exactly the sort of profile of squad Everton want. Lots of young talent combined with experience. I think it's a perfect blend for this Everton side. So there's lots to be excited about this season for Everton. I think they could definitely push for mid-table, if not top half. So next up, we're on to Leicester. We always try and be as positive as possible with these videos, but I have to be honest, I'm finding that incredibly difficult with Leicester this window. I think Leicester fans will be the first to admit it's not been perfect at all across the summer. And then literally the day we were supposed to record this, and then we had to move it a day, they decided to sack Amandine Mikel. There's rumours that they were trying to get Matt Beard out of his Burnley contract. He then resigned at Burnley. And it's believed he's going to be in at Leicester, but he's on a 3-month gardening leave. So genuinely, Harry, what is going on?
It's incredible. I've never seen it before. How have they managed to mess up this scenario so badly? It would be bad enough if they replaced Mikel with Matt Beard this close to the start of the season. But to do it when Matt Beard's now got gardening leave for 3 months, so they have to be managerless for 3 months to start the season. That is massively costly. That could be absolutely crucial to whether they go down or survive this season. That is a massive, massive balls up from the Leicester higher-ups. I get that, obviously, Burnley not allowing Leicester to talk, Matt Beard to talk to Leicester. Yes, that isn't on Leicester, but equally, what would they expect? Matt Beard's only gone in there. What, Burnley aren't going to turn around and go, just leave, mate, before the start of the season. Happy days. It is a massive balls up from Leicester across the board, and you couple that with a terrible, terrible window, and my oh my, are they in trouble? As you say, we like to be positive, and we like to try and look at every team and see what could be good this season and how they could survive. But I've never seen a team in such a bad scenario where they're going to be managerless to start the season, and they've brought in nobody. They've lost massive players, and they haven't replaced them adequately enough. And we already know that some other players that Leicester currently have are also underbid and are wanted by other teams. So they're in massive trouble. Obviously, there's still a week to go to the start of the season. Things could happen. They might pull something out of the hat and have a brilliant end to the window. But it's going to be some late business if they are going to get it done. And usually late business goes hand in hand with bad business. So we'll have to wait and see. But based on right now, they are in a really tough scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really tough. I think it's. I want to speak on Beard and Leicester, just the utter sort of disrespect. I think the problem for Leicester, they brought in this new director of football, whose name is going to escape me now, but he's worked with Matt Beard previously at the Boston Breakers in America and at Bristol City for a short time. So it's clear they're mates. And so he wants to bring Beard in. He's been trying to do that all summer, evidently, or he's been pushing to do that for a while. And so they've done no transfer business in the meantime, apart from a few free transfers and players have managed to get in swap deals and stuff like that. But they've lost so many players and they've brought in, what, 2, 3? It's a genuinely shocking window from Leicester. Their squad is now incredibly small. They don't have a manager, as you say, 11 days out from the campaign. By the time this goes out, it'll be 9 days. You'd assume that they'll have an interim in charge until Matt Beard is allowed to take charge, which will be some point in November. I mean, it just reeks of mismanagement across the board.
Yeah.
It's amateur stuff from everyone involved. From Matt Beard, he gave his commitment to Burnley for the season. You honour that. Even if, you get this opportunity from Leicester, you have to honour what you've agreed to. He's taken players there from his clubs and players that trust him and stuff like that. And then he's ditched them at the first opportunity because Leicester have come calling. And Leicester, 11 days from the start of the window, all they had to do was wait until they got to December. And if it didn't work with Amandine Mikel, then you can bring Matt Beard in. And then I think Burnley would be happy to allow those talks and receive a compensation fee. Not 2 games into the start of the season in the National League. That's just bizarre from everyone involved. And it reeks of like this mates deals and mates rates and stuff where obviously this director of football wants to work with Matt Beard, has tried to bring him in and it hasn't happened. And now they've screwed everything at Leicester.
Yeah, they've screwed everyone up because now neither side is a manager. They've gone from both teams started with a manager, and out of this scenario where Matt Beard should have gone to Leicester, and that's what Leicester wanted to happen. Neither side has now got a manager, and they're both closing in on the start. Burnley have already started. That's completely thrown out the window. And as you say, the one thing that confused me about the signings is that if you bring Matt Beard, all the players that he knows and wants to sign, they're already off all at Burnley. You're not going to get them until January. You're not going to get them without having to pay or without having to convince them to come back. It's a complete mess, and I've never known a football club to do it. It is such a bizarre scenario, and I think they've shot themselves in the foot. I mean, what did Amandine Mikel do? Fair enough to her, by the way, because obviously she heard that Matt Beard got resigned because he wasn't allowed to talk to Leicester. She stormed up to Leicester and went, "What earth's going on here? What's going?" And then she left and they got rid of her. But I think that's a massive mistake because even if forget the Matt Beard stuff and the controversy around that, getting rid of Mikel for me isn't the right decision. What more could she have done last season with that Leicester side? They had no players. They had Takarada up front. How can you expect any manager in the world to win or do well with a defensive midfielder up front? That, for me, overall was the wrong decision anyway. And then everything surrounding Burnley and Matt Beard, it's disgraceful, really, from Leicester. There's no sportsmanship in that whatsoever. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad they're, not glad, that sounds horrible, but, they've got they are being punished now for the way they went about their business.
Yeah, and Matt Beard now is unemployed for 3 months because he can't do anything in football. He's under gardening leave. So, yeah, mental situation. Let's look at the squad then, because there's no one here.
No.
So let's talk about departures. Sophie Howard, one of Leicester's best defenders, gone, no replacement. CJ Bott, gone, sort of a replacement. Nevin, gone. There's another defender who's gone as well, isn't there, Harry?
I don't really know. You've got defenders. No, they've lost Howard, Nevin, and Bott. But again, just across the board, they've lost players everywhere. I've never seen a side lose a player in every single position. They've lost the likes of Petterman and Mamiki in the front line. They've lost 3 defenders. What's going on? How are you losing everyone? Who's allowing this to happen? And that is they've lost all those players, but they still have to renew 11, 12 contracts this summer. Imagine they hadn't done that. They genuinely have no one. So how have they ended up in this position? Who is running Leicester? What is happening?
It's just this constant use of rolling year-by-year contracts. The reason they almost lost Jutta Rantala. Yeah. And if they'd lost her going into this season, I wouldn't even have a qualm about putting them anywhere bar last in my predictions video. That's how dire the situation is. Looking at the squads, they are very, very weak. There are still some very good players. I think at left-back, they've arguably got a fantastic rotation with Lass and Ale. Left centre-half or across the centre-half, T-Bow can cover both of these positions. So they've got 3 centre-backs. It's not really enough. You'd want at least 4, preferably 5. I mean, they've got young players they can hand opportunities to. I believe Celeste Burrell can also cover in the back line. So it's not a horrible situation, but it is light in that position. At right back, they've got one player who is naturally a right back. Someone I'm sure can do a job. I mean, Janice Cayman can play any position on the pitch, so I'm sure she can cover in there. But this is the problem. If you start getting injuries, suddenly Janice Cayman's playing right back, Burrell's playing centre back, and you've got two central midfielders. And so it's really difficult to say that Leicester are in a strong squad position here. They've got so few players, they're going to be in trouble this season. Wide areas, they're okay. I really like Missy Goodwin, I think she's someone who started to come into her own last year, especially with no one else in this Leicester team firing because Rantala was injured, Mouchon was injured all campaigns. They really struggled. On the right-hand side, Chosanote, I think, showed glimpses last season, but I think was a frustration about a lack of end product, which I can't say I was massively surprised by. It's one of the issues we highlighted when we did this video last year, when we looked at Chosanote, said really exciting profile, great dribbler, but where's the end product? Where are the chances, where the goal involvement's going to come from? Enix Dottir can play anywhere across this front line, which is very useful to have when you don't have many players. If you've got players like Enix Dottir and Cayman who can play so many different positions, they're like Swiss Army knives, then you do fill a lot of those rotational positions. Rantala's sort of their only attacking midfielder, so what they're going to do there, I'm not sure. Whether they move to a more midfield three and put Rantala on the right wing like she's done before, potentially that's what they'll look to do, but again, just so short of options right now, it's not looking promising. And then a front line here of O'Brien, who struggled really to meet the level last season. Draper, who's a very exciting young player. I hope she gets minutes this season. And Naomi Mouchon, who we've seen play about 90 minutes of football for Leicester before she got injured. So hopefully we actually see them given a chance as attackers. They got injured at the start of last season. I thought, oh, this is really exciting because they've got good players. Mikel's going to get an opportunity now to use those players. I was very optimistic Leicester would do well last season because I rated Amandine Mikel highly. I thought the players she brought in were good and I thought Leicester would look good. But now, 12 months on, Mikel's gone. Now the players are finally back from injury. The timing's horrible from all involved. So I try and be as positive as possible in these videos. I don't want to sort of cast doom on teams, but I struggle to find many positives to speak about on this Leicester side. So finally for today, we are on to West Ham. West Ham had a very mixed season last year. I remember some particularly strong results like 7-1 against Crystal Palace, but there were also some really disappointing performances. They felt like a side where you never really knew what was going to happen, which I think is quite apt for everything at West Ham, where they either overachieve or completely underachieve across both the men's and women's side. But the women's team, I think there's a lot to be excited about. I think they've done well to hold on to some of their best players this window. I think they've supplemented the squad with some real quality. So I think there's definitely some things to be very excited about, Harry.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, going into last season, I predicted them bottom. I thought they would be relegated. I looked at the squad and I wasn't convinced. And to be honest, it looked like that for a little bit of time. They were stuck in that dogfight. But what we saw, and I think what I'm starting to realise is West Ham's kind of bread and butter, is that when the pressure's off, they are brilliant. When they played the Crystal Palace games were the perfect example of it, because when they played Crystal Palace at the start of the year, they went 2-0 down early on, and yes, they turned around to 4-2, but they still went 2-0 down. To turn back, you go forward a few months, playing towards the end of the season, and they smashed them 7-1 because there was nothing to play for. And that's exactly what West Ham have done. Look at the Arsenal game, where if Kirsty Smith hadn't caught the football, they probably would have got a point from that at the very least. Thank God she's left the club. We won't see any of that anymore. So, it's one of those where when the pressure's off, West Ham are brilliant. So if they can start the season well and get themselves into a good position, I think they'll play well. It just feels like whenever there's something on the line, they seem to balls it up. So what they need to do is make sure they're in a position where there is nothing on the line, and then towards the end of the season, they'll put a few good results together and end up climbing the table with a couple of wins in a row. But yeah, as you say, it was a good end to the season. In front of goal, they were absolutely incredible. If they can just shore that defence up this campaign, then I think they could be in for a very handy season.
Yeah, I think as well, the fact they've still got Shakira Martinez, who I'm very surprised we've not seen a top club throw £500,000 at, because I think that's all it would take to prize her from West Ham, and she's a very talented player. So to keep hold of her with her goal-scoring record at the end of last season, that guarantees you a goal a game in the first half of the season. I think with players as well, like Vivian Asayi, who's now just been able to... West Ham been able to hold on to her for years now, but she's such a talented player. I think they've got a really solid attack. Their midfield with Katrina Gorey in there. I mean, they can't rely on her forever, but they can rely on her for now. The only problem for them last season was their backline, but they have done some things to try and improve that. So that is something. Were there any major outgoings, Harry?
Major outgoings.
A lot of it was just cutting deadwood.
Yeah.
Like Christy Mewis, who was a brilliant player, but she played like once for West Ham in 2 years.
Yeah, they did really well. As I said earlier, they got rid of Kirsty Smith, who, let's be honest, isn't at the level anymore. Emma Harries as well, Talbot, Mewis, Brynjarsdottir. Yeah, as you say, no one major left, but they just did really well.
Brynjarsdottir played a fair whack for them last season.
But again, do I think she's WSL quality? Yes and no, on and off, but I think they did well to just get rid of players that potentially weren't at a level. And again, when you're looking at the players I just mentioned, a lot of them have left to the WSL 2 or to the National League, which sums up exactly the level that they're at. So yeah, I think they've done pretty well to just get rid of players who aren't good enough, but as you say, not lose anyone big, and that's the main thing, is that they've done well to keep those key players in the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a look then at the squad going into this season. So some of the signings they've made: Vandela, really exciting player, right, Harry?
Yeah, 100%. A player that I think was very talented, came into the Euros and was absolutely brilliant, and is one hell of a player. Came through Lyon, or not Lyon anymore, OL Lyonnais, and came into the Euros and looked really, really sharp. And I think that a player that could really shine. Look, for me, it gives very strong likeness to when Shakira Martinez came in, a very talented player who just needed to be given a stage to shine on, and she took the microphone and ran off and scored loads of goals. That's exactly what Vandela could do this season for West Ham. And it adds more quality to a really good front line.
And I think what they're creating and how their system is going to work is just 6 players that stand at the back and these 4 attackers who are really fast. What they're doing is just signing really fast, dynamic forwards, players that can play anywhere across the front line, really, players that can interchange. It's what they're doing. So if you look at this front line, I mean, other than Adam Aloyi, who I would say is more of a sort of out-and-out striker, and perhaps Shakira Martinez, but even then, Martinez could definitely pull wide and get involved. But other than Adam Aloyi, they've got players who can play anywhere across the front line. We're going to see, loads of pace. Imagine it's a Vandela, Martinez, Uweki Asei breaking away on the counter. That's so difficult to try and handle. And this is assuming, of course, they continue to use this 4-2-4, which has seen them a little bit open defensively, but could also give them huge dividends in attacking areas. But it's going to just allow them to break in behind with a lot of pace. We're going to see things like Asai pulling inside, Uweki pulling wide. Same on this side, perhaps, so Martinez pulling wide, Vandler cutting in, that sort of thing. We saw that with Manuela Parvi last season, cutting inside, getting shots away. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with this West Ham attack. It looks really promising. In terms of young players coming through as well, Harry, have you seen much of Sara Bracero, capped at under 19, under 23 level, started off at Ipswich Town, went over to Estoril, so quite a varied career already.
Yeah, and again, it fits the bracket of player that I've just spoke about, where West Ham pick up a player who's impressed through the youth ranks, is capped at a youth level, and has done well at the clubs that she's been at, but just needs that step up, and West Ham have given her that, and a player that, again, with consistent minutes, learning under some of these quality players at West Ham, could really come into her own and put up a good season. I think that what the main thing for her this season is that she isn't going to be solely relied on to do a job, because she's got players around her that can help her out and can contribute as well. So that will be the main thing, is it'll be a nice season for her to just get used to playing in the WSL, get used to top flight football, and then really start to shine as the season goes on.
Yeah, indeed. The other signings, Fionn Morgan. I know we like to joke that they've just signed her for her TikToks, but she is also a very talented footballer. And again, a fast attacker, a dynamic attacker, and she suits exactly what West Ham are looking to do with this front 4. Both fullback areas as well. Really good cover now. You've got Baluma and Hanshaw, who I couldn't decide which way around to put them, and similar on the right-hand side with Denton and Endo. So they've got fullbacks who I think are fairly interchangeable. I would be somewhat concerned at centre-half, because I wasn't entirely convinced by Shalana Zadorsky and Camilla Size last season, but I think they've got qualities that, if they can develop well, could be good centre-backs. But I really like the starting partnership of Tisiak and Nystrom. So lots to be excited about. The question will be, can Martinez sustain her goal scoring? And can West Ham shore up defensively? because they did try and change up to a 3-4-3 and stuff like that last season, and even that didn't cure their defensive problems. So they've got to focus on how they can keep this level of attacking performance, but look a little more solid defensively. So that is everything for today's video. I hope you have enjoyed. We're back with more content over this weekend. We're going to take a look at London City Lionesses in a bit more detail tomorrow, because we're going to need at least a few hours to cover all of their transfers. Then on Sunday, we're going to look at our fantasy WSL teams. I'm very excited. If you want to get a jump start, want to join our league before that video, head on over to the Aerial Fantasy app and use the code TWFC. We've got our own verified league now. Very exciting, isn't it, Harry?
I'm very excited. I love it.
Yeah, and if you want an opportunity to beat Harry, because you probably will, get involved in the Aerial Fantasy League code TWFC. That, though, is everything from us today. I hope you have enjoyed. If you want to watch more, there's a video covering Harry's face now, where I take a look at Andre Yeglets and how we line up at Manchester City. That'll be on screen now. Go and give that a click, or you can just enjoy the fact it's covering Harry's face. That is everything for us today. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.